sovereign state. Against all forms of control, we retaliate. We're not asking questions, we're making demands. Get out of my way, get off of my land. I wanna free all humanity. I don't wanna be a political prisoner. I wanna free all humanity. I don't wanna be a political prisoner. I wanna free all humanity. I don't wanna be a political prisoner. I wanna watch them burn. Down to the ground. Free the nearby and the cleavage fold. Jeremy Hammond and all prisoners of this social war. Rest in peace, Aaron Swartz. We came to block your authority. We don't want to be an institutional commodity. We recognize the cracks in your facade. We don't believe in your patriarchal God. I wanna free all humanity. I don't wanna be a political prisoner. I wanna free all humanity. I don't wanna be a political prisoner. I wanna free all humanity. I don't wanna be a political prisoner. I wanna free all humanity. I don't wanna be another fucking prisoner. Amnesty is an inherently defeatist position to take, one that is contingent upon surrender in order for prisoners of war to be released.
Good evening, folks, and thank you so much for tuning into UCY.TV this evening. This is the Liberty Battles radio show, and I am your host, Alex Allen. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in this evening here on this Friday, the 21st day of March, 2014. It is 9:02 p.m. Central Standard Time by the clock here on the computer from which I broadcast. So again, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to those who have always tuned in and who have always listened to my show and given me so much support. I really appreciate it. I really thank you all. And of course, I appreciate everyone who supports all of my other work as well. You know, my writing, my independent journalism, my independent writing, freelance writing, the articles that I write, the op-ed pieces that I do, all of the different stuff that I do and have done. I appreciate those who support it. Now, if you didn't catch my show from Monday, then you may not know the significance of tonight's show. But if you did catch my show on Monday, then you likely do know the significance of tonight's show. This is my last show here on UCY.TV. Tonight, this broadcast that you're listening to right now is going to be the last time I'm going to broadcast here on UCY.TV for the Liberty Battles radio show. This is the last night of the show. And I made this decision to stop doing this. Really, I've been thinking about it for several weeks. But really, last week, I really started thinking about it deeply, and I just really decided that I need to focus on my writing and that sort of thing, which is the focal point of what I'm really trying to do. I realized that I'm better at writing. Writing is what I do best, and I think that's what I need to stick with, at least for a while. And I have enjoyed doing this radio show, and I do enjoy doing the radio show. I think it's great, and I've always been interested in radio, in addition to other forms of media. But I think at this point in time, the radio show isn't. For one, I feel like I'm sort of not doing what I could be doing for this show because I'm more focused on my other things that I'm working on, and I feel like the listeners are getting cheated, and I'm getting cheated. Because I'm not living up to the full potential of the show and doing as good of work as I could be on the show. And, again, because I'm working on my other stuff and, focusing too much on that and paying more attention to that than anything else. And you know, I don't want to do that. I'd rather do, you know, I mentioned the other day that I'd rather do one thing really well than do 300 things that all suck, you know, that are all horrible quality, you know, meaning I'd rather stick to my writing and make it the best that I can make it than do a writing and a radio show and video work and audio work and, you know, all kinds of other stuff and have everything half-assed job and half-assed working and it doesn't really suck. It doesn't really, it really sucks. So that, again, that's why I've decided to quit the show. Now, as I said on Monday, you know, that's not to say that this is going to be my last radio gig ever, you know. That's not to say that there won't be a reincarnation of this show, you know, because that may happen in the future. Just for right now, for quite some time, I think radio is not what I need to be focused on. I need to, again, focus on my writing, which is what, you know, I'm trying to develop a career in, and of course that's what, again, I think that's the best way that I can convey my messages. Most times my writing and the messages that I convey in my writing are 100 times better than the messages that I convey on this radio show or through other outlets. So anyway, that is the case. Tonight is the final show for Liberty Battles Radio, and I encourage you all to fasten your seatbelts and get prepared for this final episode, because I am going to be breaking down some things and going over some very serious things, talking about some stuff, and just really kind of wrapping up, I guess, what I've tried to say up to this point throughout all of my shows, and sort of the general thesis of, you know, what I'm trying to bring, the message that I'm trying to bring. One thing that gets sort of distorted, one idea that we have a lot in this movement, I suppose you could call it, among people who are sort of awake, who are aware of what's going on, who know what's going on. One common misconception is that there is going to be a massive attack, that there is some sort of collapse just around the corner, and it's going to happen. We all need to get prepared for it, and it's all going to be just awful. And I'm here to tell you that that is not the case. And I wrote a few notes down, and I'd like to share with you what I wrote down before coming on to the show. I wanted to prepare and get this very, very well thought out and well versed, and I want to share with you the thoughts that I have on this subject. Despite the efforts of many to propagate the idea of a massive collapse of society, there will not be one sudden huge event that will end society as we know it. Instead, we will wake up one day and suddenly realize that life as we once knew it has already come to an end. Looking a mere 10, 15, or 30 years in the past, we can clearly see that things once deemed radical have now become acceptable and normal. Take 30 years ago, for example. Ironically, 30 years ago, it was 1984, the year in which George Orwell's famous, or perhaps infamous, novel was set. In 1984, the idea of federal government employees patting down people to the point of molestation at airports in the United States would have been crazy. Now we have the TSA. Let's jump forward to just 10 years ago, in 2004. In 2004, the idea that the government was listening to and recording private phone conversations and keeping records of the private information of U.S. citizens sounded like a paranoid conspiracy theory. Now it's common knowledge. So when will it end? We now have people warning of massive government tyranny around the corner, civil unrest, concentration camps for U.S. citizens, martial law, and war on U.S. soil. Based on the altering window of perception, what should prevent someone from believing that all of these things will be happening in 20 or even just 10 years without anyone having questioned it? So what do I mean by all of this? What do I mean by this window of perception and things becoming acceptable and all of these things, the martial law, the concentration style camps for people, the sort of civil unrest and war on U.S. soil, could happen in 10 or 20 years and no one will have questioned it. What do I mean by that? Well, clearly we have accepted as a society, maybe some of us as individuals have not fully accepted it, but I suppose you could argue that we really have accepted it as individuals too, because no one has really done anything about it. But we've accepted all of this crazy stuff that's been going on. And it's been getting progressively worse. You know, as I said, if you look back just 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, or 50 years ago, what's acceptable now with regards to culture, with regards to government policy, with regards to the political world, with regards to all sorts of things. What was acceptable then, or what is acceptable now, would not have even been questioned or considered back then. It would have been crazy. Just absolutely crazy. If you looked at someone in 1970 and you said, in several decades we're going to have a massive security and surveillance grid. Technology is going to develop to the point where the government will be listening and recording private phone conversations. Private conversations will be monitoring everyone, and we'll have a full record on the private information of every U.S. citizen. If you would have said that to someone in the 1970s or the 1980s or the 1990s or the early 2000s, people would have thought that you were batshit crazy, for lack of better terminology. If someone would have ten, 15 years ago proposed some of these conspiracies, some of these things that are going on, the Bilderberg Group, if anyone would have walked up to anyone else on the street just 15, maybe even 10 years ago and said, do you believe that a wealthy and powerful group of elitist individuals meet in secret every year and plan out world politics, world policies, and things that go on? If you would have proposed that just 10 or 15 years ago, people would have looked at you like you were nuts, and they would have called you a conspiracy theorist and said that you were a tinfoil hat wearer and the whole 9 yards. Now, if you go up on the street to anyone, chances are they're going to say, well, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Some of them might even say, well, yeah, I know about the Bilderberg Group. A large chunk of them, I would bet you, have at least heard of the Bilderberg Group, have at least heard of the concept of the Illuminati or the New World Order, whatever you want to call this powerful, reigning, elitist organization that controls world policy. Most people have heard of it these days and know about the specifics, and most people don't find it crazy at all, or crackpot, or conspiracy theory at all to say that rich and powerful people rule the earth. I mean, that's common knowledge now, that there are elitists up at the top controlling things, and that the politicians are basically just puppets. But again, if you'd have said that 10 or 15 years ago, everyone would have looked at you like you were crazy, you were nuts, you were a conspiracy theorist. You're just spouting out these crazy theories. If someone 20 years ago would have said, we're going to have these government documents that are labeling gun owners and politically active people, animal rights groups, and average people on the street. If you would have said 10 or 20 years ago, or heck, even 5 years ago, if you would have said this, people would have questioned it and they would have said you were crazy. Oh, you're just paranoid. There aren't lists like that. The government doesn't have lists and documents and things like that that label potential terrorists like that are just average people or politically active people. They don't have these lists. People would have said just 5 years ago. But now if you propose this idea and you start showing people the government documents, they say, well, makes sense. With how corrupt things are, with how crazy things are, it makes sense. People will say that. And then you can show them you can show them the documents, you can show them this Department of Justice manual that I believe I should have right here in front of me in this folder. You can then show them the Department of Justice manual investigating terrorism and criminal extremism, the terms and concepts manual from the Department of Justice. You can then show them that document, which basically says that people who are supporters of gun owners of America, people who are supporters of the Constitution Party, people who are politically active, are all radical extremist terrorists. You can then show them this and they won't question it. Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we still have some people that'll question it today, but we're slowly developing out of even that. We're slowly closing that window of perception, and within 5 years, I believe, people are just going to be accepting, well, yeah, the government has lists, yeah. And most of the brainwashed public is going to be so indoctrinated by the system and by the way the window of perception is controlled to agree with this. Well, yeah, obviously we need these lists. I mean, these people are radical. These people are dangerous. These gun owners of America, these Constitution Party people, these Green Party people, these radical left wingers, these radical right-wingers, these animal rights groups, all of these different groups, they're all terrorists, they're all criminals, they're all extremists, they're all radical, they're all too dangerous. Of course we need these lists. People are already saying it. I mean, just imagine in 5 years, again, with this window of perception, what people are going to be saying about this. People are just going to be full on accepting it. And we're going to evolve to a point where people just accept the fact that we're throwing people who have radical political ideologies, who have radical political beliefs, just throwing them in prisons, throwing them away in concentration camps, locking the key. We're going to evolve to that point. Why? Because that's how the window of perception is controlled. So no, we're not going to have one huge massive event. North Korea isn't going to come in and attack us, and we're not going to get a nuclear bomb from Russia, and that's going to make the whole country explode, and then we're going to go into massive civil unrest, and then all of a sudden they're just going to roll out the tanks and the Humvees and the DHS and Homeland Security, military and everything on the street, and going to start rounding people up and taking them to the FEMA camps in the middle of the night, and the DHS agent and the soldier is going to knock on your door and beat it down at, midnight and come and round you and your family up and take them to a FEMA camp. No, that's not what's going to happen. We're going to evolve, or perhaps devolve as a society, to the point where the window of perception, again, this controlled window of perception, is going to make it acceptable in the eyes of the majority of people to just, yeah, we just need to throw these radical people in prison. We just need to lock them away, throw them in prison, and it's going to be acceptable to people. Again, this is, again, just look at what was acceptable before as compared to what's acceptable now, and you can clearly see that we have totally just gone bizarre with this window of perception. Just absolutely bizarre, to the point where the average person now accepts the fact and doesn't care about the fact that the government is recording phone conversations, private phone conversations. They don't care about the fact that the government is monitoring private, interchanges between people. They don't care about the fact that the Department of Homeland Security and the Federal Bureau of Investigation have released joint intelligence bulletins, one after the other, deeming photographers or people who observe things, or people who practice certain hobbies, or gun owners, people who have coffee grinders and coffee filters, people who have goggles and test tubes, people who have lots of ammunition, people who are using pay phones, people who are paying in cash. The average person doesn't care that all of these people are labeled in these roll call releases and in the white papers, in the Homeland Security and FBI documents, as radical terrorists and potential terrorists and radical extremists. I mean, I have the document here in front of me. Roll call release, unclassified, for official use only, from the Department of Homeland Security. Suspicious activity reporting photography. It's from the 13th of November 2012. And it goes on to say in there, it uses a lot of bloated language, a lot of bloated terminology, a lot of anti-terrorism, counterterrorism terminology. And in there it basically says that if people are taking photographs or videos in public, then they are potential terrorists. I also have the document here in front of me. The Department of Homeland Security and Department of Justice joint roll call release from the 27th of December 2010, indicators of suspicious chemical, biological, and radiological activity, where basically they say that if someone has burns on their shirts, if someone has tears on their shirts or on their pants or any of their clothing, if someone has test tubes, if someone has goggles, then they are potentially making chemical or biological or radiological weapons, that they are potential terrorists. It says if you have infections on your skin, if you are missing hands or fingers. Again, if you have masks, if you have goggles, if you have gloves, if you have household items such as plant seeds, strainers, coffee grinders, and filters, then you are potentially a terrorist, according to this document. I have another document here, another roll call release from the Department of Homeland Security and, again, the Department of Justice, a joint roll call release, unclassified, for official use only, 2nd of August 2013, suspicious activity reporting, weapons discovery, where it goes on to say that if you have a certain amount of weapons, then you are a terrorist. And it even says here, possession of large amounts of weapons, ammunition, explosives, accelerants, or explosive precursor chemicals could indicate pre-operational terrorist attack planning or criminal activity. It goes on to point out that it basically demonizes people who have large amounts of firearms. And their definition of large amounts of firearms is a very, very small collection to most, people who know anything about gun collections, who know anything about guns, who are gun collectors themselves or gun enthusiasts themselves, gun owners themselves. It seems like a small collection. 7 firearms is what they're labeling as potentially terrorist activity. They give an example of one, a traffic stop where someone was found with 4 pistols, a shotgun, and 2 rifles, and 5,000 rounds of ammunition. That is that's not even close to being a large collection of firearms. I mean, some people have hundreds of firearms. I mean, that's nothing. 7 firearms is nothing. 4 pistols, 1 shotgun, and 2 rifles is absolutely nothing. But yet we have this roll call release, this suspicious activity reporting document from the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice, where they're saying that it is terrorist activity, that you are a terrorist if you have this amount of weaponry. I also have in front of me, yet another of these roll call releases. Another of these suspicious activity reporting documents. This one again from the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice. This one from the 26th of July, 2010. Indicators of suspicious behaviors at hotels. Known or possible terrorists have displayed suspicious behaviors while staying at hotels. And then they go on to say that in U.S. hotels, law enforcement and security personnel should be aware of these potential indicators of terrorist activities. And the indicators are using payphones for outgoing calls, making front desk requests in person instead of using the telephone in the room, interest in using the internet despite hotel internet availability, extending departure dates 1 day at a time for prolonged periods, refusal of housekeeping services for extended periods, extended stays with little baggage or unpacked luggage, use of cash for large transactions or a credit card in someone else's name, requesting a specific room or a specific floor or a specific location in the hotel, using a third party to register your room, multiple visitors to a room, multiple deliveries to a room, leaving the property for several days and then returning, non-compliance with hotel policies. All of these things they are saying is potential terrorist activity. Using a payphone at a hotel, paying for cash, paying for large transactions with cash at a hotel, going to the front desk to ask a question. I'm not even kidding. In this official, mind you, official, this isn't satire, folks. This isn't something off of The Onion. This is an official roll call release, an official unclassified document from the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice over indicators of suspicious terrorist activity. They say that going to the front desk at a hotel to ask questions is potentially terrorist activity and is suspicious and should be regarded as such by security personnel and law enforcement. Absolutely absurd. Absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I have an article here that I wrote a little while back. It doesn't have a date on it. But this article I wrote over another one of these ridiculous suspicious activity reporting documents. Popular hobby could aid terrorists, NCTC claims. According to the National Counterterrorism Center, a popular hobby that appeals to many photographers, artists, and other hobbyists could be aiding terrorists. In a recently released unclassified report from November 2012, the National Counterterrorism Center suggested that urban exploration A popular hobby that involves taking pictures or videos and creating sketches and diagrams of rundown urban areas could be helpful to terrorists. The report defines urban explorers as hobbyists who seek illicit access to transportation and industrial facilities in urban areas, and goes on to say that the pictures, video footage, and diagrams they often release online could be used by terrorists who are interested in scoping out a new potential target. According to this report, this hobby can give terrorists more information on security vulnerabilities and possible access locations, making it easier for them to plan an attack. The NCTC also says that any suspicious urban exploration activity should be reported to the FBI or a local fusion center. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Now they're saying hobbyists, people who explore urban areas to take pictures or videos or to make art, to create art. And this is an actual hobby. It's a legitimate hobby. A lot of people do it. People who do this are now potentially either terrorists themselves or aiding terrorists. According to a report from the actual National Counterterrorism Center. Absolutely ridiculous. But again, going back to this window of perception, all of these things that I just mentioned, all of these reports from the National Counterterrorism Center, all of these roll call releases and white papers and documents from the Department of Homeland Security, from the Department of Justice, from the FBI, all of these documents, people don't care. People just accept it. People just accept it as the truth now. Nobody cares. Nobody cares that this is going on. Nobody cares that these government agencies are labeling everyone as a terrorist. And why is this important? Well, I don't care if I'm on a list that says, oh, I'm a terrorist, one might say. And one would be justified in saying that. Well, okay, my name's on a list. What are they going to do? Well, according to the National Defense Authorization Act, the provision in the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012 and other laws that have been passed and signed into law, anyone who is suspicious, anyone who is suspected of being a terrorist, it's not someone who has been confirmed as a terrorist, it is anyone who is suspected of being a terrorist, that's the actual wording, anyone who is suspected of terrorist activity can be indefinitely detained without due process, without a trial, without a jury. They can just be indefinitely detained if they are suspected of terrorist activity. And again, according to all of these documents, you're suspected of terrorist activity, or you're supposed to be automatically, if you have burns and tears on your shirt, if you're paying with cash, if you are using a payphone at a hotel, if you have large amounts of firearms. All of this stuff, they're saying, makes you a terrorist. Or potential terrorist. And again, under that notion, they can lock you away with the laws that they signed in. They can lock you away indefinitely in a prison camp without due process, without a trial, without anything. And the average person does not care. The average person does not care that this is a reality. Nobody cares. Because, Again, we have this window of perception that has been altered to make people accept this and just go along with it. Under the disguise of fighting against terrorism or safety, fighting for safety. And it's a very, very dangerous window of perception. It's very dangerous how the window of perception has been altered. Very dangerous. I've seen the documents from various national counterterrorism centers that specifically say, again, in the documents from the national counterterrorism organizations and centers and things, specifically say that if you oppose a New World Order, and they use those terms, if you oppose a New World Order, you are potentially a terrorist and a criminal extremist. Anyone who opposes a New World Order. So now it's clear in the white papers for the counterterrorism organizations, they're just now saying it. If you oppose us, if you oppose these elites, if you oppose this global system of governance, you are the enemy. You are the terrorist. You are the criminal. And again, under that, they can lock anyone who is against or opposed to the New World Order or any sort of similar thing. They can lock these people away indefinitely. Indefinitely. So it is absurd. It is crazy. The way that things have been altered, the way the perception has been altered, the way that we now see things as opposed to how we saw them 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, or 50 years ago. It's radical. It's absurd. It's beyond Orwellian. It's beyond the most bizarre science fiction story. It's beyond all of that. Truth really is stranger than fiction. So what do we do about it? What can we as individuals, what can we as a society do about it? This is such a problem. What do we do about it? Well, first we have to come to some conclusions ourselves. The first conclusion is that you are free of all other forces. You're free. In order for someone to stop you from doing something, anything, they have to use force and physically stop you. It's the first law of freedom, the first law of liberty. You own yourself. You own your body. You own your mind. No one can tell you how to think, how to live, how to act, how to breathe, how to eat, how to sleep. No one can tell you. Or they can tell you, but unless they use physical force, they can't force you to do anything. Unless by the power of suggestion, in which case you're going along with it, and it's voluntary. Or unless it's by the power of the collective. Well, everyone else is doing it, so I have to do it too, so I don't look like an outsider, and I'm cast out, and the whole 9 yards. So you have to get the idea that you own yourself. You have to get the idea that you are an individual and that you are free. And once you come to those conclusions, what is the next conclusion? Well, the next conclusion is inevitably that government is pointless. That government itself is nothing more than a monopoly on the initiation of force. I'm not talking about the United States government. I'm not talking about the Russian government. I'm not talking about the North Korean government. I'm not talking about the Chinese government. I'm talking about government at its core. Government in general. The very idea of government is to have a collective monopoly on the initiation of force. And the very idea of government is flawed because the problem that it tries to solve is to fix human error, to fix human flaw. When a government is nothing more than a group of people who have that collective monopoly on the initiation of force. So by saying that we need a government, we're thereby saying that we, as human beings, are inherently bad. Therefore, we need to pick a few human beings from among us who are just as bad as we are to govern over us and have a monopoly on force and power so that they can make laws and make structures for us so that we can eliminate human error. The very idea is bizarre. The very idea is pointless and ridiculous. Because you are accepting the notion that you somehow have to have some sort of collective force to tell you what to do. That you somehow have to have some sort of written law to tell you what to do, and that something that is written down can somehow prevent you from doing something. If laws actually worked, if a system actually worked, and laws actually prevented people from doing things, then we would not have any problems. We would have absolutely no problems. If laws prevented people from, let's say, getting guns, obtaining firearms. If laws prevent you from obtaining firearms, if those laws then worked, then we would not have any firearms on the street. None. Because people would be forced by the law, assuming that it works, to not have them. If then the law that says we cannot murder people, if it worked, then we wouldn't have a problem. If the law that says we can't murder people worked, we wouldn't even have to have laws that say you can't own guns in the first place. Because nobody would be murdering anyone. Because we have these laws. And the idea that it serves as a deterrent for criminals is absolutely absurd. If you're criminally minded, and if you have the mindset that you can somehow take another person's life and be justified in it, in an assertion of force, not in a self-defense situation, that's obviously completely different. But if you have this idea that you're justified in taking someone's life, then you are not going to pay attention to a law that says you can't. Oh, well, I was going to go murder this guy, but I better not because this piece of paper says I can't. No one has ever said that. I mean, yes, we have the consequences that people weigh. We have that sort of situation, but when you get to a point, there's a certain point that you get to as a human being, as a person, where you don't care about the consequences. So, to say that people are deterred by these consequences, that people are deterred by all of this system, is absurd. People murder. Do you know how many murders take place every day? How's that law working for you, buddy? So all of that being said, we have to accept these truths. We have to accept that government itself is flawed. But then at that point, if we eliminate the force of government, if we eliminate that factor in our lives, then we could have utter chaos, people would claim. And yes, it's very true. Unless we first learn to accept some other truths. That because you own yourself, other people own themselves as well, and they have just as much of a right to their life, to their property, and to their liberty as you do. And we can have a genuine respect for one another. Which is why we have to promote a new narrative for society. A narrative that promotes not only truth, but independence, positivity, and fulfillment as human beings. We have to promote a new narrative. And we have to break open, shatter the window of perception. Shatter the window of perception. So that people can see the truth. So that people can see what's going on. And so that people can then come to learn these truths, accept these truths, and live life. If we can do that, we can progress as a species. And we can evolve to the point where government is obsolete. And to the point where we all are absolutely free of force and free of coercion. This is all sort of this is all sort of the general thesis, I suppose, of what I try to say. I want people to realize, because I used to accept the notion that government was necessary too. I used to accept that. Well, I thought, if there are no laws that say you can't murder, then more people are just naturally going to murder people. But that's before I realized that the only reason that is the case is because we don't have a natural respect for one another. And if you look at how society has evolved from the Stone Ages to now, look at our moral compass. Look at how morality has evolved. And you can see that as a whole, we as society, we as a collective, we as human beings are beginning to accept other people's rights gradually. So no, I don't think that we can end all government tomorrow and everything's going to be peachy keen and wonderful and everything's just going to be fantastic and, flowers are going to be abloom and the whole world's going to be fantastic. It's not what I'm saying at all. Because we can't end government tomorrow. We can't end the whole system tomorrow and bring it down and anarchy. That's not what I'm all about. Because it would cause utter chaos and it would cause an increase in violence. It would cause an increase in murder. But people have to stop accepting the fact that they need someone else to tell them. They need some collective force or a piece of paper to tell them they can't do something in order for them to not do something because they don't have the morality themselves. They don't have the decency themselves. They don't have the knowledge themselves to understand right from wrong. We have to have a cultural shift where people understand right from wrong and where people understand these things. And where people understand that they don't have to have someone to tell them not to do something in order for them to not do it. Because if you're going to do something, you're going to do something regardless of anything. Just like someone is going to get drugs if drugs are illegal and use them. People are going to get guns if they're illegal and use them. And people will continue to murder. People will continue to do all sorts of things that are questionable, that are immoral, that are wrong. Even if the law says they can't. And to say otherwise is to not accept reality, to not accept the truth. If government worked, I wouldn't be up here saying that we shouldn't have government, that government is bad, that government is absurd and ridiculous. But the fact of the matter is, the very idea, the very concept is flawed. We have to evolve as a species past it. I'm not even saying that's going to be something that we can do in 10 years, in 15 years, in 20 years, in 30 years. But we have to start getting rid of government from the top down, piece by piece, going to smaller government, having less interference in individuals' lives, letting people make decisions on their own, letting people handle things with the free market. If someone is going to murder you, you stop them. If someone was going to murder me, if someone had a knife to my neck, if someone had a gun to my head and was going to murder me, I would shoot them. I would do everything I could to defend myself. Then, if they're shot and they are harmed badly, that would deter them from doing something, likely would deter them from doing something in the future. If they're shot and killed, then that's one less criminal we have to worry about. It's not a perfect society, but there is no such thing, folks, as a perfect society. No such thing as a perfect society. So since there's no such thing as a perfect society, since we can't mold a utopian society where everything's perfect and there's no murder and there's no war and there's no violence and there's no corruption, since we can't mold that utopian society, why don't we just let people make decisions for themselves and open up a free world in which people can defend themselves and can make decisions for themselves? Using free individuals to deter crime and the threat of self-defense, that can deter just as easily as any law. So why have laws when we could just allow people to be free? Well, folks, that's my message. That's what I want to get across to people. That we need a new narrative for society over the next 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years, however long it takes. We've evolved to a point where we no longer look at, as a society, as a whole, some people I suppose do. We no longer look at people of different races, of different genders, any differently, with different rights. We've evolved past the Stone Ages. So why can't we continue to evolve past the point of needing the force of government? And I'm not being naive. I'm not disregarding any facts here. Yes, murder will always exist. Crime will always exist. But because of that, what's the point of trying to mold? The whole idea of government is to work towards a utopian society. I mean, isn't that the ultimate goal? I mean, if it's not the ultimate goal, then it even has less of a purpose. But since we know we won't be able to achieve this utopian society, why must we continue to support the idea that we need a government? So thank you so much, folks, for tuning in this evening. Thank you for all the support you've given me. I really appreciate it. Of course, this is my last show here on UCY tonight. This is going to be the last episode of the Liberty Battles radio show. So again, thank you so much for your support. Thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it. If you want to keep up with me, following this show, now that I'm not going to be here, broadcasting on UCY, I'd encourage you to check out all my social media and follow all of my writing stuff, which I'm going to be doing a lot more of. I write for digitaljournal.com, occasionally for theantimedia.org. Of course, I'd encourage you to follow me on Twitter, at ALN845. Like me on Facebook at facebook.com/libertybattles. And keep looking, keep listening. Stay free, stay peaceful, stay happy. Thanks for listening. God bless.